We're back on The Big Show. It's Alex Belfield talking to my favourite guests. And, you know, I'm so lucky on this programme because I watch people on telly and then I speak to their people who sleep with their people who talk to their people. And eventually you get to meet Andy Parsons. How are you?
I'm very good. And I'm not quite sure who you've slept with, but it's a pleasure to be here.
How's it going? Because it seems fun to be you because you're a comedian.
Yes, well, sometimes it is. Obviously, you know, the perception is we just lounge around all day, drink heavily at night, get to meet some people and generally lauded around the streets. Obviously, there is a little bit of work involved somewhere along the way.
And what exactly does that consist of?
Going to a lot of places around Britain which aren't necessarily as welcoming as they might be. But gradually, as you move up the comedy ladder, the places get better.
I think you've got a tough job because you go on all those quizzes where you have to be a clever dick and you have to be spontaneous and you have to be funny. And that's not easy, is it, really? Especially if you've got Dara O'Brien there or people who are funnier than you are. Not that I'm saying Dara is funnier than you.
You haven't set that question up at all well, have you?
I really ought to start writing these down. It'd save uncomfortable moments like that.
Life is tough for you, Andy, when you're on with lots of funny people. Yes, I mean, that's part of what you're paid for. If you're on with 6 other comics, you've got to fight for space, but you've also, most importantly, you've got to fight for the eye of the production team and make sure the edit does you a favour. And if you record, as we do, 3 hours for Mock the Week, you can see that in any given half an hour you can look fantastic or you can be made to look a bit of a fool, and you've just got to hope the edit does you some favours.
And the problem with that programme I've got, you're all very funny, but I find it uncomfortable at times with that mic bit where everybody starts chinning each other to get to it. Is that for shtick and for the act, or is that really competitive?
I think that's the disadvantage of having a 3-hour record, is that it never used to be that competitive, and it has become too competitive, and it's not an aspect of the show that I enjoy. But obviously, if you don't get to the microphone, you won't get in the edit, and you know, nobody will understand. You know, if you just stood there on the sideline or stepping off the step but never quite making it to the microphone.
I've always found comedians curious people. I love the old guys. I love getting Doddy on and Ronnie Corbett and people like that. And then there's your lot, which are the young guys that are very irascible and funny, and you don't mind saying anything because you'll push the boundaries if you have to. I see you as kind of middle ground. You're not that Frankie Boyle who tries to be shocking every time he speaks, but you're not a camp old nonsense comedian. You've kind of found your own niche, haven't you?
I haven't done puns. I'm not done puns, and I've not gone into the twilight hours doing a 6-hour show with 4 jokes a minute. No, I mean, I talk about what's going on in the news, and you know, that obviously you try and surprise people because that's what comedy. That's an essential element to comedy. But I've no need to get people to break down in tears, upsetting themselves.
And have you got to be a bit odd to be a comedian because you've got to look at things in a funny way, haven't you?
I don't think that's necessarily true. That is obviously one aspect. You could have been tragically abused as a child, be very unhappy, been desperately to get yourself together, and that's the only reason, you know, and you just need the love of the whole public. Alternatively, you could have done law at university, hated the idea of doing law, basically not been quite sure what you wanted to do, suddenly got writing for a weekending, thought it was quite good fun, looking at the papers, worked out what annoyed you, and realised you could make a living from it, and then decided that nothing better cropped up, you'd keep doing it.
You see, I'd read that you just weren't a good enough lawyer.
Well, you've been probably reading the bloke who first employed me as a lawyer. But no, you know, generally I feel lucky and it's great fun and it's great. You know, as I'm sure you were about to ask me, the tour coming up is, you know, it's a privilege to be able to go around the country and play big venues, beautiful venues, and have them packed out for people to come and see you.
Do you mind if we don't mention the tour that's coming this spring? Because I think to mention the tour would be, well, it's not in keeping with the tone of the interview.
No, I'm absolutely. If you don't want to mention the 38-day, you know, date tour that starts in February, I'll be absolutely perfect with that. That won't be a problem for me.
And if people don't want to visit your website to find out about this imaginary tour that's taking place in the spring, where would they go if they didn't want to go there?
I would think where they really want to avoid is andyparsons.co.uk. That would really tragically give them more information than they really want to find.
Now we've done that bit, can I go back to doing my Jeremy Kyle bit and ask you questions about whether you were abused as a child?
Yes, you certainly can. Obviously, I'm not sure whether I would tell you, but no, I had. There's no very little angst in my life, and the angst usually happens when you wake up and you read the papers and you go, how has that happened? And then you go, brilliant, I'm glad it has happened because now I've got something to talk about this evening.
I was watching David Letterman the other night, and he said that he's so depressed about this election because not to have W there just takes away 50% of his act. For you in this country right now, though, so much is going on. There's just endless opportunity to mock, isn't there?
Well, George W. Bush done us all a favour. He's about to go out of office, but he's managed to muck up the economy so badly we can talk about that instead. Then we've got Sarah Palin coming along, who's obviously, arch redneck, even more of a redneck than W ever was. So, it just keeps on giving.
Do you think she's going to end up in one of those mucky magazines? Because she's the kind of thing with those glasses that I do enjoy looking at on the internet.
I think you've been letting your imagination run rife there. I don't think she will, no. I think she's got enough money not to end up in a mucky magazine.
And help me with stories like I was reading today that they've spent £90,000 on her wardrobe in the last 3 months. It might not be funny, but it does make you go, is it me?
She's trying to pretend that she's this hockey mum, and a hockey mum doesn't have that sort of money to throw around. And let's face it, if you do put lipstick on a pit bull, it looks nothing like her. I know.
And then we look at you as an act, and you are an act in a sense that you go on stage and make people laugh. That's not normal. But you've got kind of a really identifiable voice and a funny face. Do you mind me saying that?
No, I think I can live with both of those. I think people would back you up on those. But also, I mean, I hope as well that people have a vague idea, if they were going to come to a tour that may or may not be happening, that they would have an idea of the material. And, certainly this will be my second tour, and the first one was great, is that, there's a wonderful thing about people coming to see you do what you do, and they've had an idea either from radio or TV what you do, and they like it, and it's very flattering and gorgeous.
And you're so lucky to have the radio stuff, which really came before the TV stuff, because we got to know your voice, and that's really your calling card. I don't mean in a Joe Pasquale way. Your delivery, did that come naturally to you, or is this the way you talk generally and when you're a lawyer?
Yeah, no, I mean, I haven't changed anything, but obviously over the years you get a feeling for, and you just go out and do it, but then you sort of realise some of what you've done, and then obviously the next time you do it, you sort of fall into a little bit of what you did previously.
And how are you watching yourself back? Is that enjoyable? Is that embarrassing? Awkward? How do you feel?
Well, only really doing it just to check what jokes have gone out and exactly what I can do next time. But no, you can spend too long analysing yourself, go out and have fun, and if you're making yourself laugh, you've got half a chance of making somebody else laugh. I'm
thinking of becoming a comedian, and you're a sex symbol, so I can ask you this question. I mean, how good is it for pulling the ladies being a funny man? Well,
I think you just described me as having a funny voice and a funny face, and now I'm a sex symbol, so it's all, these things are slightly mixed up in one's own head. But yeah, no, I mean, if you can, stand up in any room and be appreciated, then you are going to be, at least somebody to maybe have a drink with afterwards, and that can be a good starting point.
And is it easier being you now, the comedian, than maybe you 10 years ago, because they're coming to see you opposed to just turning up and you happen to be on?
I think with a lot of things, it's a double-edged sword. First of all, it's easier because they're there, they already like you, and they're expecting, and so those first 5 minutes or whatever, there's an advantage and they'll give you some leeway. I think the flip side of that is if you then don't deliver within a certain period of time, then the backlash is much heavier because they've expected so much. The disappointment if you don't deliver is that much greater. So it's one of those things that you do have an advantage, but it's also a disadvantage if you don't perform.
And then I look at your CV and see where you've performed. Montreal is a place that I've not managed to go to yet to see the comedy festival. I nearly made it last year and didn't. You've won awards there, you've performed there. Can you be funny anywhere? If you're funny, you're just funny.
It's actually anywhere where they speak the English language or at least understand the English language. You have to change your material remarkably little. And, going to Montreal, it was very much a case of just cutting out the very specific British politics, but apart from that, obviously George W. Bush is funny wherever you go in the world.
And do you have to slow down? Do you have to speak more clearly, or are you just you?
Mostly you can just be yourself. The one place where I was very conscious, I was playing Zagreb in Croatia, and very much mostly it's English as a first language. Whenever you go to Hong Kong or wherever, it's mostly those people whose English as a first language. In Zagreb it's very much English as a second language. It's very much all Croatians, and so everybody apart from me was Croatian on the bill. I understood none of it, and literally the first thing I knew that I was on was bloody blah bloody blah Andy Parsons, and it's like, oh, it's me. So you come on, and I slowed it down, and I had 2 sets, one before the interval and one after the interval, and the advice in the interval was, we're really enjoying it, we think you're great, could you please speak faster, you're patronising us. So My advice would keep at your normal pace.
And how fun is that? Do you go with somebody or do you go alone? Because I find trains, planes, cars by yourself, and especially hotels and B&Bs, incredibly depressing.
Right. Well, maybe the life of the gigging comic is not for you. But for me, it's a chance to do some reading. And usually when they're there, you're looked after brilliantly. And you get to see, like, rather than just as yourself as a tourist, you get to see the inside of a place. The best stuff is usually the stuff that done on the hoof. So anything that you can throw in is great. They love it. They love that you've made the effort. And obviously, you know, if you are talking about their town, you know, you're touching on them, they feel special. So yeah, no, I think I will try and certainly have a little idea as to, one, the venue, and two, the town.
And the ad-libs from the audience, it still gets tremendous laughs, doesn't it?
Well, they do know that it can't be repeated. If it's, you know, let's say we're talking about the venue, or we're talking a person in the audience, or something that's happened, some sort of gaff, you've mucked something up, they know it won't happen quite like that again. And so that's, for them, that's a special moment. And yeah, no, rather than trample on it, I think it's enjoy it and expand it.
The one thing I think you've got is your warmth. Is that something that you've just got about you? You can't really work on that bit, can you? No,
it's something that hopefully I've had since I started, and it's a wonderful thing that, you know, when you walk out, people, you're already getting half a smile, and that's definitely a bonus and something to be cherished, and hopefully something I won't lose.
And with a show like that, how much are you thinking about the recording of it? Is it all week just trying to get stuff up there so that you're ready to come back if the moment arises?
Yeah, I mean, it's exciting because obviously you know, it's your chance to give your take on the week's news, and you know, if something's happened that really's annoyed you, there's a chance to go out to 3 million and plus people with your opinion as what's gone on, and you know, you're hoping to persuade everybody that what you think is not only funny but right.
And I suppose for a comedian, your worst fear is being accused of being a hack or nicking someone else's material. How do you know that what you're thinking you haven't heard from someone else or isn't an original thought? Do you know what I mean?
Well, I suppose that's the one advantage of doing topical shows. If a news story's just broken, it's pretty much has to be your own thoughts because you can't have nicked it. So, you know, if you're doing something that's happened that day, you can't have, you know, it's not like you can have gone through loads of comedy tapes and gone, I think I can just change that. You literally, you're on your feet, and that's why, you know, that's exciting, but also, you know, you are breaking new ground because nobody can possibly have done it.
I was talking to Mark Thomas the other day, who is on this programme, and he was saying there's certain things now you can't talk about because they're seen as hacky, like airports and airlines and aeroplanes, because everybody talks about them. Students, you can't talk about student life now because it's been done to death. Are there things you try and avoid?
Yeah, no, I think airports is reasonable, but you know, even with airports, let's say, you know, if something's just happened, like for instance, there was the Qantas flight with the hole in it fairly recently. You know, if there's things like that happen which are that week, then you know you've got to talk about them anyway. It doesn't matter, you know. And there's always going to be some stories with students with tuition fees or whatever. I think, you know, there aren't, you know, hack sort of topics as such. There's just hack ways of dealing with them, and there's always a new way of finding, you know, to deal with whatever comes up.
And then looking at the show generally when you're on the TV, do you set each other up, or is it just every man for himself?
It is sadly pretty much every man for himself. We do get on well off stage, which is definitely a bonus because when we're on stage, it is a fairly pressurised atmosphere. But yeah, no, you're always pleased if you know, if you can get a bit of 1, 2, 3 going, and you can look funny and they can look funny and everybody's happy.
Going back to the radio stuff, which you did originally, that I think you're brilliant at, Parsons and Naylor and all the stuff you've done for 2, 4, and I think you're on 7 now as well on repeat. I hope you get a lot of money for that.
Yeah, no, there's definitely £3 there coming my way.
Radio's so much more intimate, isn't it? You have to kind of play it a little more differently, or do you just do your act?
Obviously, you're slightly more in control of the radio than the TV. There's less people on it. You're more in charge of the script and who else is on the show. So that aspect is very enjoyable. And you know, I would love obviously to get to the stage where maybe some more of what I've done on the radio could maybe transfer to the TV, and I'm working in that direction.
I went to see Steve Coogan a few weeks ago, and he did the entire show off cue cards because he couldn't remember what he was saying next, which I think is just appalling at £35 a ticket. How do you learn your show? Because you can't really do it off the cuff. There's got to be a certain basis to the show, hasn't there?
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't have any cue cards, and I know the show, what I would set out to do if there was no interaction or whatever from the top, and obviously you'll forget certain bits, but generally you'll know what you were going to talk about. You'll have little sections in your head, and you'll think, oh, let's do that, and then something may kick off and you may do a bit earlier or a bit later. You may decide that a certain bit's not working, and maybe tonight that's not the night for it. I guess part of the thing is always have slightly more material than you actually need to use, and then you can just flick through in your head, oh, let's do that now, let's not. That's the fun of it, really, in some ways, editing yourself before you've actually got to do it. So, but no, I would, if I went to see somebody and I thought they were reading off a script and I'd paid the sort of money that I expected them to give me a fully polished show, I'd be very disappointed.
Absolutely, and I was, and so were the audience. There was no standing ovation that night to his sellout crowd. Who are your influences? Who really made you laugh when you were growing up?
Well, I used to love Morecambe and Wise, and I used to love loads of different stuff. But it was never something I thought, that's what I'm going to do or whatever. I just enjoyed watching it, and it was. As I say, it was only really when it came to having to actually make some money and work out what I did want to do, and I just sort of fell into writing for it. And from then on in, you just go, well, it's better than actually anything else that's on offer. And luckily enough, it's worked out.
And how do you feel about using other people's lines? I know there are comedians out there who sell mega arenas that don't write it themselves. Is there a problem with that, or do you just trust your own mind and you're happier and more comfortable with that?
Ideally, you'd write everything for yourself, and but as you move on, there's just so much out there that at times you've got to use other people, and you need help. You can't write everything yourself, given the amount that you do. And obviously, there is some advantage in having other inputs into your own stuff. But ideally, and mostly, I write everything myself. And there's obviously, for me, there's nowhere to hide then, which is great, because it's sort of, if it's funny, not only have I written it, I've performed it, I've had the idea, and you're your own sort of self-contained cottage industry.
Who do you look at and go, they're brilliant? Anybody
who's good. I'm always impressed by. I love watching comedy, and as you say, the hack stuff upsets you after a while because you've seen it, and I enjoy going to see people who don't do hack stuff, and the people who inspire you and go, that if only I could have thought of that, or whatever. It's the people who surprise you, and mostly we. Going to Montreal Festival, you realised how good British comedy is in comparison to the rest of the world. And, we have a much more vibrant stand-up circuit than anywhere else. We've got more clubs, we've got more variety, and we're very lucky. And why do you think that is? We just love to laugh more, or they're just not as funny as we are? Well, I mean, there's various theories, but the reason we have more comedy clubs is more British people like going out to watch comedy, and that's the end of it. They have too much, in America certainly, they have too much on the cable TV, which has killed it dead, but it's really killed it dead because it wasn't innovative enough, and we, for whatever reason, we've had so many different styles of comedy, and they're all still going. And I don't want it to take you to a dark place. I said we were going to do some Jeremy Kyle stuff, but that feeling, going back to the old days, and you deliver it, and you're expecting the zing and the round of applause to come back, and of course they look at you and didn't get it. What is that feeling actually like? Well, I think in the past it might have been fearful. You might have been scared, oh crikey, they're not going to like me or whatever. Now it's actually quite exciting. How do I get out of this situation? How do I make this funny? And it's like, and provided you bring the audience into, in on the joke, let's have some fun with this. It didn't quite work as we were hoping, but, we can go some really interesting places with that. They're great with it. And again, it's that sort of thing, not necessarily seeing people struggle, but people are having to work on their feet, and they can see how the mind's working, and they enjoy that process. So it's a mixture of confidence and trusting the mind then to be a great comedian. I think you obviously have to trust yourself to get out of a hole, and the more you do it, the more you trust yourself. It's been really lovely talking to you. Congratulations. We haven't got time to talk about the tour that starts in the spring. What was that website that we forgot to mention? I think it was andyparsons.co.uk, or go to the MySpace page, Andy Parsons Live. And is that anything to do with you, or is it just a coincidence that that's your name? I think somebody's taken my name and put all the dates for the tour that may or may not be happening on that page. That's quite incredible, isn't it? And supposing you did eventually go on tour, where would you be performing, for example? Well, I think if people were interested, anywhere from Glasgow down to Liverpool to Manchester, Newcastle, Barnstable. I've been told that on that webpage there are such dates, even places like Salisbury, where people to be interested. And I'm suffering with short-term memory loss about this tour. What was that website again? I think it was andyparsons.co.uk. That'll be £42,000 for that advert. Andy Parsons, thank you for talking to me. Thank you.